Current 4G technology, fourth generation mobile internet, is what allows all the apps that we love on our phones to operate. 5G technology is what will power things like autonomous vehicles and the so-called Internet of Things. Whatever countries can lead the race for 5G will surely see huge economic boons coming from it. Good for consumers, good for jobs. President Trump says it's vital that the U.S. be one of the countries at the forefront of 5G network technology.
Secure 5G networks will absolutely be a vital link to America's prosperity and national security in the 21st century. It'll make American farms more productive, American manufacturing more competitive, and American health care better and more accessible.
But the U.S. is playing catch-up to China. China has already made huge investments in building out 5G networks. Also, the U.S. has essentially banned Huawei, a Chinese firm that is one of the leading manufacturers of the back-end technology to build out these 5G networks. There are no U.S. manufacturers that can build out this type of equipment. But the White House says they have a plan to boost the race for 5G. They will reduce regulations and make a large chunk of radio spectrum available for 5G technology.
We finished our first 5G spectrum auction in January, and we're holding a second right now that has already generated almost $2 billion in bids.
The White House is also making $20 billion available to build out broadband connectivity in rural areas. Many analysts are already wondering whether this plan is enough to move the U.S. to the front of the race for 5G technology.
Brooklynites fighting a new initiative at their Brownsville home that their landlord says will provide additional security, but tenants say it's a violation of their privacy. News 12 Brooklyn's Emily Lorsch tells us more.
The landlord of this development, Nelson Management Group, has plans to install facial recognition technology at the entrance, a system known as Stone Lock. But tenants say they're not going to let that happen.
It's invading our privacy.
Those who live here at 216 Rockaway Avenue saying they're concerned about who will be in control of their private information.
It's going to add information for law enforcement or other government agencies.
That's why they filed an objection to the plan with the state's Homes and Community Renewal Agency, which oversees rent-regulated properties.
Tenants have no ability to opt out, and therefore the landlord is going to be controlling their biometric information in really an unregulated area of the law.
In response, a spokesperson from Nelson Management Group tells us, quote, "We are using a leading provider of security technology for these upgrades, which has assured ownership that data collected is never exposed to third parties and is fully encrypted. We appreciate engagement from tenants on this matter and look forward to feedback from DHCR." However, those who live here telling us they don't believe their personal information will be kept secure. They say they already have a security guard and don't believe this technology is appropriate for a residential building.
This is not a prison, and guess what? We are not animals. You don't have to tag us. We don't want a chip, and we don't want to go back to the days where they used to put tattoo on people's arms.
That's why they tell us they're not backing down.
How does my iPhone know that's me? And how does Facebook know that's me? And why is Facebook always asking if I want to tag myself in these photos? Well, both are using facial recognition technology. So what's going on?
Facial recognition is not a new thing. It was pretty simple. People would use a ruler to take measurements of your facial features, like how long your eyebrows are, the position of your eyes, the curve of your lips, and so forth. Today, the process is much faster.
Now, we use more like deep learning-based method, which raised the recognition even higher than a human can do. So almost perfect.
That's Won-Suk Lee, a professor in the School of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science at the University of Ottawa. She has 15 years of expertise in facial recognition, facial modeling, and computer animation.
Wait, did she just say the accuracy rate of facial recognition is almost perfect?
So almost perfect.
Almost perfect? There are all these headlines about facial recognition being racist or having pre-programmed biases. Why was Amazon's recognition misidentifying dark-skinned women but identifying white men?
That's basically because they don't have a lot of database for African people. If we recognize the gender, or if we recognize age, and then also if we recognize ethnic groups, or with the skin tone, we can raise the recognition system better.
Gotcha. So if Amazon's recognition was having trouble identifying dark-skinned women, programmers need to feed it more images of dark-skinned women and show them in various scenarios. Different lighting, various angles, in different outfits, wearing hats and sunglasses, all things that would increase the accuracy rate.
So theoretically, if the facial recognition software has enough variety of images of me, it should be able to recognize me 100% of the time, even if I fed it an image of me in a darker scenario with glasses on and short blue hair.
Now, I don't care if Facebook misidentifies me as someone else, but what about when facial recognition misidentifies people at the airport? Or when law enforcement uses it to make an arrest?
Caucasian people recognize Caucasian very well, but they don't recognize Asian people very well. They don't recognize African people very well either. People are depending on familiarity kind of thing. Machine can do more objective work. If they are trained enough with various people, with enough data.
Luckily, it's not left up to just the machines.
And if facial recognition gets it wrong, there are other methods in place like fingerprint, iris, ear, and palm recognition. But this still doesn't address the security and privacy concerns that come with this new technology. Let's start with facial recognition in airports. According to a recent report from BuzzFeed News, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection stated that they're using this technology to 1. Identify non-U.S. citizens who use fraudulent travel documents, and 2. Provide a quicker check-in process. But there are concerns that the U.S. government is using this technology to create a digital identification library of millions of Americans without their consent.
Viewing terrorist propaganda online in the UK could now land you in jail under a new law that has just come into force. The government says the new measure is aimed at preventing terror attacks.
These new laws give the police the powers they need to disrupt terrorist plots earlier and ensure that those who seek to do us harm face just punishment. As we saw in the deadly attacks in London and Manchester in 2017, the threat from terrorism continues to evolve, and so must our response, which is why these vital new measures have been introduced.
New amendments to the Counter-Terrorism and Border Security Act include jail terms of up to 15 years for clicking on terrorist propaganda. People also could be jailed for showing reckless support for banned groups and entering designated areas abroad. Human rights groups, though, have voiced concern over the new measures.
The bill is legislating close to the line, or indeed crosses the line, in breaching human rights.
One should be able to freely browse the internet in private, without fear of criminal repercussion, as part of the basic enjoyment of the right to privacy and freedom of information.
Well, we spoke to George Samouli. He's a senior researcher at the Global Policy Institute, and he says the UK government may have a hidden agenda.
I don't find it logical at all. I think it's clearly a law to restrict speech, to restrict academic research, a way of ensuring government control of expression and thought. I mean, it's of a piece of what's been going on in the West over the last few years, in which governments have increasingly brought the internet under control. They use different guises, fighting terrorism, trying to thwart Russian influence on the elections, but it always has the same effect, which is to limit the freedom to study. The British government couldn't give a damn about terrorism. Anytime the British government insists that they're in the business of fighting terrorism, you know that's a lie. They couldn't care less about terrorism. They are using terrorism as a pretext to do what they really want to do, which is to restrict what people can see on the internet and what people are able to communicate with one another on the internet.
Fox News alert New York City declaring a public health emergency as health officials deal with a growing measles outbreak in Brooklyn. Brian Yannis is live in our New York City newsroom with the latest. Brian.
Melissa, good afternoon. There are now 3 measles outbreaks in New York State, in Rockland County, Brooklyn, and as of this morning, Westchester County. County officials confirming 8 children in Westchester have the measles, 6 of which are siblings. The children were not vaccinated, and it appears they got the measles on visits to Rockland County and Brooklyn. To stop the spread, New York City's Department of Health issued the extraordinary order yesterday, mandating that all children and adults in these 4 zip codes in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, must get vaccinated against the measles. Those who fail to get vaccinated and become infected, or parents whose kids become infected, could be fined $1,000. New York City is relying on disease detectives to enforce the mandate.
It parallels what a police detective does. If someone has symptoms, they literally will interview them to figure out everywhere they've been, everyone they might have come in contact with, and then they go and reach out to that whole network to make sure people are vaccinated.
There are 285 confirmed measles cases in New York City. Most are children and most are in the Orthodox Jewish communities. City officials say anti-vaccination literature has spread misinformation and falsehoods about the dangers of vaccines.
People are beginning to question, why should I subject my 3-year-old to toxins when it's not going to protect him or her?
The people themselves should do it on their own. They should realize that the children are up to hazard conditions if they don't do it. That's all.
Melissa, this is the largest measles outbreak in New York City since 1991. There are at least 465 measles cases nationwide. That's already more than all of last year.